Great. Thanks, Rick, and to our panel moderators for including OraSure. I'm Kathy Weber, and I'll talk for a few minutes about our role in at-home diagnostics. Next slide, please. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with OraSure, so I have an introduction here. We are a life science and tools company that has a mission of helping solve the world's greatest healthcare challenges through access to accurate, essential information. And that might come in the form of a diagnosis using one of our many self-tests, or in insights into biological systems for use in discovery through some of our molecular solutions. Among many things, we are a pioneer in rapid point-of-care diagnostics for infectious disease. And Dr. Bright mentioned our work in Ebola with BARDA many years ago. But our first foray into self-testing was with our HIV test, the OraQuick in-home HIV test, which was launched in the US in 2012. In the current pandemic, our role is twofold. We have novel saliva self-collection kits for PCR testing, and we launched, with BARDA support, the IntelliSwab COVID-19 rapid test. Next slide, please. I thought it would be interesting to start this conversation around self-testing with our experience in 2012 with the OraQuick HIV test, as it did generate many lessons learned that we're leveraging today and will continue to leverage as we fight infectious disease going forward. So some of the lessons from our experience in 2012, the first was the benefits of non-invasive sample type. So in this case, oral fluid, in expanding access. It took the ability or the need to go to clinics for blood draws out of the question here and put an easy oral swab in the consumer's hands to enable them to self-test. It also confirmed the consumer's ability to test and manage their results when given the appropriate resources, the appropriate support network, even in a case like HIV where the result could be a positive HIV diagnosis. We always underestimate the consumer, but they really proved through the HIV test, a test designed with the consumer in mind, that they could manage their results. Our experience in HIV self-testing also highlighted the value of public-private partnerships. I think that's been a key theme throughout the day. Sometimes we're limited in how we can deploy these types of tools and the economics of the tools. So we relied heavily globally on these partnerships for procurement, for deployment, and for subsidies to get the tools in the hands of the people that needed them. One other lesson learned here, and this was key to the approval of the HIV self-test in the US, and it was the first infectious disease self-test that the FDA did clear in the US, was this broadening of the risk-benefit conversation beyond individual health into population health, which helped us think through differently some of the questions around the lower potential sensitivity of a tool. This is an antibody test, so it does have a window period. The potentially lower sensitivity of this type of a tool and the lack of link potentially to surveillance data from a public health standpoint, it helped us broaden the conversation to assess those risks against the population benefit of having this type of tool in place. And then finally, a lesson learned on the commercial front is that sometimes these types of products, the commercial opportunity is tenuous. And as a publicly traded company who has to answer to questions around shareholder value, that is something that we have to consider as we're developing these types of tools. Next slide, please. So I'll fast forward to 2020, 2021, and what we've learned through COVID-19 self-testing. And these are really category insights, not necessarily linked solely to the IntelliSwab test. But the first, and I think this is obvious for anyone who's in the space, our ecosystem around diagnostics approval is not built for speed. And there were several challenges across the industry in terms of understanding what the gold standard for comparison for these types of tests would be, access to live samples to patients for clinical studies, and even the changing guidelines as the knowledge of the virus grew. They all delayed the ability to bring tools to the market very quickly. I think overall, the industry did a fantastic job, but potentially could have been faster. I think we did see, certainly at OraSure and in some other companies, that leveraging existing platforms like the OraSure Rapid Flow technology accelerated development. And it's something that we should consider going forward. How do we invest in platforms so we're ready to adapt for whatever the next pathogen is? This has been mentioned earlier today several times. This pandemic highlighted telehealth as a tool to manage diagnostics and treatment. It really brought telehealth to the forefront. And yes, we have opportunities to continue to evolve our understanding and use of telehealth, but it certainly played a role and demonstrated its value. Public-private partnerships again became critical in terms of deployment and procurement of tests, but also in just expanding capacity and getting the production capacity in place globally to produce these types of tools. This pandemic also, as I think everyone knows, highlighted many of our global supply chain vulnerabilities. We had never thought before of a shortage of swabs or Tyvek packaging for diagnostic tests. And one of the lessons learned here is we might need to think differently about some of those aspects of our supply chain as it relates to diagnostic testing and self-testing. And then the last point here, and I'll attribute this to either Michael Crichton or Jeff Goldblum, depending on how you first encountered the movie Jurassic Park, life finds a way. And this pathogen obviously evolved, others will as well, and we need to prepare for that evolution and be ready to rapidly respond and adapt and adjust. And I think the headline or the pervasive lessons learned here is that communication and collaboration across industry, public health, clinical providers was critical as well. Critical lesson learned here, and we would not have been able to do what we did without that partnership. Next slide, please. So how do these lessons guide how we might want to act in the future? First off, this investment in non-invasive sample types to expand access is critical. HIV and COVID highlighted the use of oral fluid and nasal swabs, both of which consumers can easily sample themselves. But there are other samples like urine, which is emerging as a wonderful sample type rich in biomarkers for things like HPV diagnosis, which is key to cervical cancer screening and control of that different issue. Stool is also another self-collected sample that may have great health insights. We should continue to invest in platform technology so we're ready for the next pandemic. We should be including telehealth and other technology into all of our solutions. It is a tool there. It is something to be leveraged, and the combination of self-testing, telehealth, and even self-sample collection, might not be full self-testing at home, but self-sample collection really can expand access and bring much more control into the consumer's hands as it relates to diagnostic testing. The public-private partnership work that we've done, we should continue to advance those and strengthen those. They are critical to managing these types of pandemics. And I think there is some opportunity to consider economic incentives for investment by the private sector. It is tough to bring a case to a board or explain to a shareholder community that you're preparing for just in case when the opportunity might not materialize. And we might want to think about that differently and put some more just in case incentives in place. And then finally, continuing to evolve our mindset. I think it was mentioned on one of the calls that, or one of these sessions here, the pandemic forced us to think differently about the consumer's role, about the risk-benefit decision, about our approval processes. We should continue to push that thinking, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. We have solutions available, but we might need to challenge some of the paradigms with which we approach issues today. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you for your time, and I will see you on the panel.